everybody. Welcome. This is The Yard Sign, Florida's political podcast. Jonny, Torres, your host. Anibal, David Cabrera joining me as always. And we have a special guest joining us for the first time tonight. And so, of course, plenty to talk about, as there's never a dull moment in Florida politics and certainly in our current national politics as well. And so let's get right into today's topics. We'll talk about DeSantis defeating Disney and why nobody's really kind of out there celebrating. So we'll pick that story apart as, again, this show, we're only an hour away from the Magic Kingdom and very relevant, of course, even in this 2024 election. And so we'll talk about why it is or isn't affecting the presidential campaign. Biden's burning house. I mean, is there really, I mean, I don't know, somebody said it online. I don't know who 30% of Biden supporters are, but they obviously are living under a rock because anything that can go wrong is going wrong for this administration, including something we're not even going to be able to get to today, but the UAW going on strike. So now they have that to add to economic factors out there. And of course, the 2024 poll numbers, as there continues to be a lot of speculation about who is or isn't in the race. And of course, how vulnerable is Joe Biden, not only against Trump, but of course against the entire Republican field. That's a much larger conversation that we're going to be getting into today. So, as I said, joining Anibal and I tonight is a special guest, a friend for a long time. We worked together in the same building in Huntsville, Alabama, where I was getting my radio start. That was my first on-air job was in that building, and then I came to learn when you and I were kind of catching up, it was your first talk show, right? Because you'd come over from music radio. So Darla Jaye joining us. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, thank you so much, and it's so awesome to have you here in town. You've semi-retired here to the state of Florida, like many do, and I think your timing couldn't have been better, and very cool to also have your knowledge, your expertise politically now here in our backyard, and so hope that this is the first of many appearances to the show.
I would like that. As long as I don't screw up today, right?
Well, as many people do in the radio industry, because I moved about every year I was in the business. I know you moved around quite a bit too. Explain for those of us who were kind of born and raised here, like really how different is it out there, in some of these other cities and states, in comparison to, the Florida that you've now come to know, being that you've moved here.
Well, I grew up in Minneapolis, and when I left Minneapolis for my first radio job, I went to Lafayette, Indiana. So I went from downtown Minneapolis to a cornfield. Yeah. And I got to my apartment, and I couldn't figure out what the smell was. There was a pig farm on the other side of some houses, so you could never open your windows.
Wow.
I went from there to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Mm-hmm. I was there for 8 years. Then I went to Cleveland, Ohio. Then I went to Minneapolis. Then I went to San Francisco. Then I went to Detroit, and from Detroit was when I decided I didn't want to be in rock radio anymore. Yeah. And the only person who would give me a shot was Bill Donovan in Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah, who's still alive. I mean, because he was old when we worked there. I mean,
is he listening?
I know. I mean, but that's amazing. Because he did make so many careers and gave so many opportunities. His most notable, which they use obviously as a selling point because they used it to get me in the door.
And me too.
I was working in Tampa, same thing. I'm working big city, big market, and Bill West just turned the key just hard enough, to convince me to move to Huntsville, Alabama, of all places, to do Top 40 radio. And his big selling point was like, hey, well, I don't know if you knew this, but Sean Hannity got his first talk radio show in this building, and I was like, wow, that's amazing, and in a similar fashion, I kind of felt like I grew out of music radio, in the sense that I felt like it was almost like phony. I felt like there's so much really important things going on, and I'm here talking about music and pop culture and celebrities and stuff that doesn't truly mean anything. And that's that was the beginning of my process of self-discovery for politics, and my passion for politics. I didn't realize I had. I never, my family was very apolitical, and so here we are, still banging the political drum all these years later, and I can imagine, because Anibal and I have had these conversations when we've taken a break from the show, how hard it is to kind of sit back and not have a platform to to get all these perspectives and all this analysis off your chest.
I've said to several of my friends, I need somebody to yell at. I mean, I follow the news. I'm still a news junkie, and I follow politics, and I get so frustrated. It's like, who can I tell? My dog doesn't care.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So,
well, and you don't want to alienate any more friends than you probably already
right.
have.
and I don't know the neighbors' politics and where I'm living, and but I miss being on the air. I don't miss the business.
Gotcha. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because even way back when, I could almost see the beginning of the end. In terms of the end of where the industry is now, and that's a whole nother conversation in terms of where radio is, and and in very similar ways to broadcast television and newspapers,
right.
and they're struggling. And I think just the Cliff's Notes version is we'll see the day where it's going to go back to local ownership. I don't think
that would be great.
I don't think some of these companies, especially the bigger they are, I think the harder they're finding it to truly monetize or profit or make the profits that they were hoping to make by building these kind of national corporate conglomerates of radio stations.
Yeah, I was, after I left Huntsville, I was in Kansas City I was on the air for almost 15 years.
Wow.
There. And in the beginning, it was great fun.
Yeah.
But as we consolidated more and more, and my company kept buying more stations, I think there were 8 stations in one building.
Wow.
And I kind of saw the writing on the wall. I mean, I kind of got moved around a little bit, and because when I first got there, they'd never had a female talk show host.
Yeah.
In Kansas City.
Right.
I don't think they had in Huntsville either.
No.
So I was kind of like the token chick when I first started.
Yeah, the only women you'd hear were typically like co-hosts on a morning show or
That's
something
exactly
like that,
right.
And but again, I've always felt that was kind of an advantage, especially in today's environment.
Right.
We're seeing both on television and in radio more women obviously taking those kind of anchor type roles and having their own programs and that sort of thing. And so like I said, excited to have you here in town.
Thank you.
Excited to have you on today's show. Not so much.
I don't know why I'm here. Honestly, I don't know why I'm here.
But let's start off with, a topic that I think Anibal and I are secretly very passionate about, but it's DeSantis defeating Disney. Whenever you want, producer, you can go ahead and pull up the article, because when this all started, it started because of the parental rights bill.
Right.
Where teachers were not allowed to talk about gender and sexuality and things to their students without parents' permission or parents' approval, especially when it came to their personal situation. And then that, of course, got taken completely out of context by the left. The media latched onto that and turned it into what they then called the Don't Say Gay bill, which wasn't about that at all. Kids are still free to be whoever they want to be in the halls of their schools. But Disney, under its previous CEO, decided to jump in the fray because they do have a large contingency of LGBTQ employees and got the whole thing again misconstrued. They had it all wrong because they were basically just reading whatever the media was putting out and didn't actually read the bill or the language in the bill for what it was.
Does anyone ever?
Those people
Right.
know.
No, they find one paragraph, and that's what they latch onto.
Well, and it became the perfect storm. You had a CEO who then pulled all political donations from the state's largest employer, or one of the state's largest employers, and to be honest, he did pull from both sides. They pulled political donations on both sides. But again, just kind of kept digging deeper into that whole into that whole controversy. And so then, even with Bob Iger coming back into the fray, the company maintained that they were going to cancel a bunch of projects, which they did because they were moving people out of California because of COVID. Mm-hmm. And so they were going to build this kind of big corporate park in like near downtown Orlando that was going to also be millions, if not billions of dollars. They canceled that. And then they claimed that they were going to stop or reduce investment into its Florida parks. Well, fast forward to September 9th, and there's a great article about it on floridapolitics.com where they're talking about how Disney is going to be investing billions of dollars into its parks over the next decade. Why? Because it's its only profitable arm of the Disney company right now.
Their movies are not.
They're talking to Nexstar, which is they own local TV stations. They're about selling ABC off to them. But the rumor is that Penn Gaming, which used to own Barstool Sports, may end up buying ESPN. So they're trying to unload, I guess, what really is their biggest loss leaders right now, which is television. And
their stock's in the tank too, isn't it? Pretty much.
It's been at almost a 52-year low now for I think 6 months, and so what's interesting to me though is neither side here really is kind of taking a victory lap on this. Now my speculation is because they do polling on this stuff, and I think they realized that this fight with Disney wasn't getting DeSantis anywhere, wasn't getting him any brownie points on either side, really. And on the liberal side, obviously, or even on Disney's side, well, it wasn't a win because, again, they kind of had to not only cancel, but they decided to cancel a bunch of things because of their financial situation, but at the same time, they have now decided to kind of go against what they claimed, which was that they weren't going to be investing as much in Florida.
I mean, the last official comment from the governor was, we're moving forward. We're moving on this.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't want to talk about it anymore. He doesn't want to bash them anymore. And I think that the larger conversation is that I think you're right. I think the governor's team has decided that this is a losing or not mutually defendable position at the moment.
Yeah, it just doesn't move the needle.
It doesn't move the needle. Floridians are still going to Disney parks.
Right.
Their movies are garbage right now.
Awful.
A lot of their franchises and everything else is
now, as you and I both know, the parks are not as full as they have been in the past.
Correct.
We don't see that.
It's also 112 degrees outside.
Right.
In the summer. Like, this is the time when Floridians actually go to the parks because no one is there. And we see that happening more often now that more Floridians are attending the parks than before. But I will say this is just not a winnable on either side. I think I do see the Disney company starting to purge a lot of its own individual companies and starting to spin off. I would see a lot more spin-offs happening. The Barstool situation with ESPN and the other one was fascinating to see how he was able to pay basically nothing to get Barstool back. So that was a crazy situation on their side.
Well, and it's more than just the investment, right? Because you could say, well, it's obviously going to benefit them and they have to do it just to remain competitive. As Universal has huge expansion plans underway already in Orlando. But to me, the other big win is for DeSantis is that he basically loaded up the governing board for Reedy Creek, the Reedy Creek Development District, which is Disney, basically. That's the name under which they're governed because they own so much land. They're basically their own city, their own town. And they cleaned house, got all the Disney people out of there, and they've put, all the governor's people in there. And I think that long term, we'll see what kind of an effect that has. But that to me sends the message that Ron DeSantis is the governor of Florida. And you don't mess with the governor of Florida.
Well, basically, it was a win for him. I mean, some people were upset that he was going after Disney, but Disney, in my opinion, brought that on themselves.
Yeah.
By saying, "Oh, this is the Don't Say Gay bill," and coming out, and ever since then, you see all kinds of stuff coming out of Disney with Oh, I saw a couple of guys are now Disney princesses. And, that culture stuff really sticks with people. And I think that for Ron DeSantis, he got what he needed out of it, and now he's moving on. And Disney is now only going to go after him for, freedom of speech, they're saying?
Yeah, that seems to be the only lawsuit that's kind of left out there, is this kind of freedom of speech, which again brings it back to, do corporations have a freedom of speech? And
if you're taxing them, if you are taxing them, then they do have freedom of speech.
Sure, right, which is the Republican argument for allowing them to make political donations, which goes back, I don't know, 20, 30 years?
Yeah.
The Citizens United?
Yeah, exactly. And so, again, while I think a lot of people burned out on that whole fight pretty quickly, to me, looking at it, I do give him credit, for his presidential campaign and saying, he's not afraid to go up against this international corporate conglomerate, because, again, Disney has billions of dollars. And lucky for him, they haven't decided to retaliate, because they could. They could easily start their own pack and start smearing him and destroying his campaign. Now, I don't know if that's going to change if he were to win the nomination. Right now, obviously, they don't see the need to get involved,
right?
Which we'll talk about in a little bit. But do you think that this whole fight is over on both sides?
I would like to say that it's over. I don't see the benefit of either side moving in the direction it needs to go to take another hit. If you're going to attack, once I think the midterms occurred and Governor DeSantis got another 4 years, and the 20-point plus lead that he received from that,
huge, and
moving Florida from a purple state into a definitive red state, I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think Vox made a video talking about how Florida has been going from blue to red and now solid red. And in the back of our mind, I'm like, they would never make a video like this for California. Why did it go from red to blue?
Sure.
They only care about, and they were talking about the things that were causing problems that they feel are issues for Floridians. But it was more or less like Florida was a state that everyone is very happy with the governor. Everyone was happy with the policies. And if Disney wants to try to do something, maybe a pack in the future, but I don't see them throwing any more money that they can no longer afford to begin with.
Well, in thinking about this also, again, long term, right? Because this Republican stronghold didn't happen overnight. This started really with the Bush administration. Jeb, actually under a very strong, kind of funny how it all kind of repeats itself, under a very strong education reform platform, really kind of made the case for Republican leadership. Education was always like his strong suit in reforming education here in Florida. And we got lucky. We after we got past Charlie Crist, we ended up having great Republican leadership, as governors. Rick Scott did a fantastic job. I think DeSantis has continued to build on that. We have billions of dollars in surplus. And again, they, at least at the state level, they haven't raised taxes, and the cost of living, aside from the housing market, has remained relatively kind of consistent. The housing market is
crazy.
And again, there's the market forces.
I should have moved here 6 months earlier.
Honestly, that's how it was back in the day.
And there's market forces out of our control, right? In that regards, there's not really much the state can do, because really the only solution to bring down housing prices is to build a lot more housing, which causes a whole slew of other problems, especially here in Tampa Bay and Hillsborough County, where we originate the show. The parts of the county where you and I live, the construction is still happening at a much faster rate than the infrastructure. And that's a really bad position to be in.
It's been a thing where Florida never built up, like outside of South Florida. Now you're seeing a situation where everything has to go up, and the costs are going up and everything else. So we're going to lose that charm, because no one wants to live in the outskirts or in the podunk parts of the counties. They want to live inside the cities, and the only way to do that is to start building up, and that is causing its own issues onto itself, because the cities are not used to that kind of development that quickly. besides Miami.
Yeah.
Honestly, Miami is the only part of the state that is used to building up very quickly because they have the Everglades, which you cannot build into. And they're basically landlocked. And you can't move into the sea. So
and what's happening there, I think, is also eventually, I think in another 20 years on down, going to be what's happening in is going to happen in Pinellas County, to the point where you're so landlocked, you start to go vertical, but then the lack of land to build any kind of new development on gets so expensive that the prices are going to become astronomical. Now, there are a lot of other reasons why Miami real estate is as ridiculous as it is. A lot of it, unfortunately, is, I think money laundering, and other things going on. I mean, you hear reports about a lot of these condominium buildings being practically empty, but they continue to build them. And even New York is having that problem too. A lot of these Billionaires Row buildings, because
they all came to Florida.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so we can kind of transition to the next topic because, again, we've seen that obviously for DeSantis, the Disney issue didn't really translate nationwide. I think he can still use it.
I think in the beginning it did, because I know I was living in Texas before I moved here, and I, started following DeSantis, and one of the things that impressed me was that, and I will use this, he has testicular fortitude. He will actually stand up and say what he believes, and he'll stand behind what he believes. And I think a lot of people who consider themselves Republicans are ticked off that more Republicans don't fight back. And so I think that was what elevated him, is because he was a fighter and he wasn't going to back down.
Yeah.
And
that's where we've seen a lot of Trump's influence on DeSantis. That's undeniable. Yeah, I don't know exactly kind of your timing as to when you were here, but I think you missed that first gubernatorial run when DeSantis got elected the first time. He was not the same person that he is today.
No, he's not.
He's always been a not so great public speaker. He's always been kind of flat, not as charismatic, not, charming. It was, to his credit, it was Trump's endorsement that basically pushed him into winning that election against a very popular opponent. Adam Putnam basically was Florida's political golden child.
Correct.
He could do no wrong.
Until he ended up in jail, right?
No, not Adam Putnam.
Oh, you're talking about on the Republican side.
Yeah. On the Republican side, I mean, he had been in Congress. He'd been an agriculture commissioner, very popular, despite, again, being in relatively unknown positions statewide. Because, again, like right now, most people couldn't tell you who their agriculture commissioner is.
But we did.
But but Adam Putnam did a great job he had a great name ID in the state.
And wasn't he ahead until Trump endorsed DeSantis?
Yes. Oh, he was. It was almost a shoo-in. I mean, it was like his race to lose until that endorsement. That endorsement changed everything. Fast forward, and then again, he adopted a lot of Trump's mannerisms, and he adopted a lot of what I think is why I also give a lot of leeway to Trump, because it was the one thing that I heard when I first got involved in politics for so long, is that Republicans don't push back. Republicans don't punch back. They don't defend. They don't, and Trump was all of those things. He pushed back. He punched back. He didn't let the left and the media win.
But he also did it with a good sense of humor. And one of the things about DeSantis is, when Trump first endorsed him, when he was first running for governor, he had a couple of those commercials that were very entertaining. It was him reading to his kids about building the wall, and I think he needs to do that because he doesn't have the charm.
The problem is it's not natural, right?
Right.
Like it almost has to be coached into him.
And you can't make somebody charming and funny.
Not off the cuff, right? Not when you're meeting hundreds of people in Iowa, not when you're, again, nonstop and, you have to do a lot of things off the cuff. It's not easy to be witty and charming and, those kind of things.
Sure it is. I mean, look at me, right?
Well, and what's unfortunate is that when he has tried to be relatable and that sort of thing, it's come off as kind of forced. And, you got the people who make fun of the way he laughs or the way he dresses or the way,
those white rubber boots and the sweater vest.
Come back to those. Always come back to those.
So, so it's one of those things that you can only borrow so much,
right?
And that's where he falls short of Trump, and that's where Trump wins a lot of people over, because. Like I said about Chris Christie, like Chris Christie is Donald Trump without the charisma. You know what I mean? Like he's aggressive, he pushes back. He likes to punch back at the media and that and at liberals and that sort of thing. And remember, pre-Trump, Chris Christie was like the guy, right? Like everybody loved that about him, that abrasiveness.
He lost 20 pounds. He was ready to run.
Right.
It was going well, and then it just all fell apart.
And then Donald Trump was like the next iteration of that, because he did have not only that abrasiveness or that again, the simplest way to put it is Trump has nothing to lose. You know what I mean? Like he's a self-made man. And so he doesn't have to answer to anybody, whereas all these other politicians, to be perfectly honest, they all have donors and they have people in their ear and they have that they have to listen to and be careful that they offend or don't offend and that sort of thing. Trump doesn't care about any of those people.
Well, and I think one of the things about him running now is if he wins, there's nobody holding him back.
Yeah.
He's not running again. He's got 4 years to take a wrecking ball to Washington, D.C. And I think that appeals to a lot of people, even though it's like, please don't start tweeting again. And couldn't you just shut up for a minute?
Right.
But he has good ideas. He did do good things while he was president, but most people paid attention to, look at the shiny ball over here.
Right, exactly, all the drama.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
I cannot wait for a second administration. But let you continue with the stream of thought that you were
because the truth is that I think it gave Ron DeSantis the fortitude to take on a Disney, to take on the media, because he realized that there was more upside than downside, like taking that fight to them. And so when the reporters, again, were trying to corner him, he could fight back and it not backfire on him. And I think Republicans for way too long were afraid of the media. They were afraid to punch back, especially against the mainstream networks, which again, Trump could care less about. He's been covered by all of them for so long, for his entire, his entire adulthood. He doesn't have this kind of pedestal that he holds them on. Whereas again, a lot of politicians live and die by the media because they know that the media can make or break your campaign. And Trump, I think, understands that his persona is bigger than that. Right, it's bigger than any one network or any one media outlet, and that it only helps him with the average voter to push back and tell them when they're wrong and tell them when they're being unfair and tell them when they're obscuring facts.
I think the biggest problem that we have right now is the fact that I don't think DeSantis ever thought he would have to run against Trump. I think that was never a thought when he received the original endorsement when he became governor 6 years ago.
Well, we've talked about the timing, though.
Yeah.
And, and I'll kind of end the topic on this, because you also brought it up, Darla, I think even before the show and just a little bit ago. Yes, timing-wise, it's not ideal, right? We all kind of wished, hey, you hate seeing a huge primary like this because it guts your resources for the general election. But you have to understand that DeSantis right now has a platform that helps him get elected, and that's being the governor of Florida. In 4 years, he'll be 2 years out of having been the governor of Florida. And so now you look at a Chris Christie, a Mike Pence, a Nikki Haley, these people who were former governors who don't have that platform anymore, and they don't have that punch. They don't have that leverage of a platform because they're no longer the executive of a state. And so that's why I think he had to build this now versus 4 years from now, whether Trump was on board or not. It's just, I think he's stronger now in 4 years than if he had waited 4 years, because now he has the donor base, he has the donor, even the voter database, right? He knows people that are supporting him, people that donate to him. So basically, if this primary does not turn out the way he wants it to for him, he's going to be ready to go in 4 years. And regardless, he's going to run in 4 years because Trump can't run again, and Biden can't run again.
You don't think that I'd said to you earlier that, my opinion, DeSantis waited too long to get in, because you never let your main opponent define who and what you are. And Donald Trump had several months to hammer DeSantis, and he did. And I think that hurt DeSantis quite a bit. I wonder, and before he got in, I thought, if he gets in, because I really liked him, and Donald Trump destroys him, then he's done, right?
Yeah. Well, but politically speaking, if he had jumped into a presidential campaign before the legislative session, that also would have been a huge mistake.
He had to wait until they changed the law, right?
Well, not only changed the law, but they also, until he kind of checked off, his responsibilities, which was being, the governor for the legislative session, because they would have seen him as distracted or removed or distanced from his actual responsibilities as governor. Now, once this legislative session's over, you really don't have much to do as a governor other than to make sure that things go smoothly when there are things like hurricanes and other, catastrophes like that. But I think it would have been a terrible decision to launch the campaign before the legislative session, despite the law. But I think that was the main thing. He wanted to make sure that legally he was free and clear to run.
And wasn't the law what he needed that because if you're governor, you weren't supposed to run for another office? Was that the law?
I think it was. I don't know the precise verbiage, but I know that you couldn't officially launch a campaign without resigning your original position.
Yeah.
So I think that was the change that
he would have had to have resigned.
Yeah. Because that happened with Marco on his second time around. He had to resign from the Senate. And then when he realized he wasn't going to become president, he had to run. He was able to
No, because that's papers. A federal. No, that's for federal. That
Senate is federal.
No, that's what I'm saying. That didn't apply to federal. He didn't have to resign.
Okay.
But it is for statewide, and so it's the reason why back during the Chris administration, which I don't know how closely you were following, but when the Senate seat opened up, he appointed his chief of staff basically to be the interim senator until his term as governor was over so he could run for that Senate seat. And that set up the matchup between Chris and Rubio in 2010.
Is he a Democrat or Republican, an independent right now?
He's pan. The best definition to give it. It's more of a
pan political.
Wherever the wind blows is really the way he's going in that direction. Because he's been the spectrum. Literally has been the spectrum.
But that was the reason why. If Charlie Crist had run for that Senate seat in 2010, before his term as governor was over, he would have had to have resigned and then allowed for the lieutenant governor to take over those responsibilities.
And then appointing
an interim. Everybody knew he was going to be the interim senator.
Correct.
Appointing his chief of staff basically to be the senator.
Ingenious.
Everybody knew that was a basic placeholder,
right?
Because he thought there was no way he was going to lose that campaign for Senate. He was a popular governor. He was moderate. He was, he was a shoo-in. He basically, it was his race to lose,
and he's still one of the best Florida politicians. What's it called? I always forget the word when it comes to small town politics.
Retail politics.
He's the best.
He's very good at that.
Retail politics.
He's like Clinton.
Yeah,
you always hear those
amount-
stories about Clinton being so great.
Always remembers your name and always knows who you are, and it's fascinating. Like I run into him almost all the time, and every time he's like, "Oh, hi, Anibal," I'm like, "How do you even remember my name?" And I was like, "I've never voted for you, and I've told you I won't vote for you, but you still remember." It's absolutely insane. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
How's your wife?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, and anyways, well, I had so many stories of Chris that I could tell, but getting over to our second topic, let's go ahead and kind of reset here. Thank you everybody for watching The Yard Sign. Darla Jaye, our guest today, conservative talk show host extraordinaire, Anibal David Cabrera joining me as well. We'll talk about the Bidens and the burning house. That is it reminds me of the meme, I don't know if you've seen it with the little dog that's inside the room that's completely on fire.
Fine. Everything's
and they're
fine.
like, yeah, everything's fine.
Yeah.
And so not only is now Hunter being brought up on these federal gun charges, which is small potatoes compared to what's really happening. And I think they're going to try and use these gun charges to try and cover up all the actual corruption that's happening. But now we've got this impeachment. And regardless of whether Fetterman thinks it's a waste of time or the Democrats don't think they have the votes, the truth of the matter is it's politically it's good ammunition. It's only going to continue to anchor down Biden's approval rating. It's only going to make the independent voter or the voter who may not like Biden, only kind of deepen that resentment towards him, because there are a lot of Democrats that don't want him to run. I think it's like 60% of Democrats don't want him to run.
Or they want another option. They want another choice.
Yeah, and so really,
And it's not Kamala.
I think and we all know this impeachment hearing is what it's surfacing now is that the Freedom Caucus, which is Matt Gaetz and Byron Donalds and a few others, they said, hey, we're going to let you become speaker, under the condition that you bring up impeachment charges against
And he pushed
Joe
back
Biden.
against that forever.
Yeah. But again, now they have all the evidence. And I think what they're trying to do really is, regardless of whether or not they can actually impeach him, is at least have this evidence officially come to surface and
So that
be
everybody
released
hears
to the
about
public.
it.
Exactly.
Yeah, the speaker multiple times told them that we were not going to do this right off the bat. Like, you have to give it time. You have to allow the process to work out, because I think they wanted to impeach him like last year, honestly.
Yeah.
And so now that we have so much more evidence coming out, and that there's literally fire in the House when it comes to what's happening in the White House, there needs to be that. This makes sense now that we're doing the impeachment articles, and they're going to start the process of just the inquiry of the impeachment concept. And I like that idea. I'm very annoyed thinking that we're going to have to deal with an impeachment for every single president going forward, because that's just how it is right now, because everyone's upset with each other.
Yeah, but it's one of those that if you look at it, I mean, again, whether it's Trump or Biden in this situation, they kind of created these problems for themselves.
Yeah.
It's not like they were with Russia, as we now know, Steele dossier, Russia involvement, blah, blah, blah. That was all manufactured. That was all manufactured by the Democrats.
Correct, all of it.
And so now, could they do something like that, let's say, to a DeSantis or a Nikki Haley, or and just make up something?
Of course.
And yes,
That's what
absolutely.
they do.
But
it would be very difficult to do that now.
Yeah.
Because there's so much pent up anger within the population. Like, look, you were telling us 3 weeks before the election last cycle that this was real. Like all your FBI people said, sign a paper, oh, this looks real, and now it's not true at all. So was there any ramification for all those people that signed that letter? No. But the American people are upset that this got to the point to where we've been wasting our time for the last 4 years dealing with this crap.
Well, and you look at it at the state level. I mean, Democrats are still suing Ron DeSantis for having removed Andrew Warren, having removed the state attorney in Orlando. And so they're always going to find something to push back with, right? Especially here in Florida, where they have no political power whatsoever.
None.
But what again, I think gives DeSantis the edge over Trump is that DeSantis doesn't go into these decisions lightly. He's an attorney. Ivy League attorney, JAG attorney.
He's a smart man.
I mean, so the reason why he's been so successful as a governor is because when he's made these controversial decisions, he's made sure that he's gone about them in a legal way. And so people want to talk like redistricting right now for like the Orlando area and that sort of, the Jacksonville area and all that's coming into light where one court shoots it down. Well, I bet you for every one court that shot it down, there's going to be another one that's going to approve them. And that happens in every redistricting move. And what's even crazier about that is the Democrats have to approve the maps as well.
Jonny, I understand what you're saying, and I get what you're saying. But at the end of the day, the governor is too short to be president. And because of those issues...
That's right. They're usually over 6 feet, right?
Yes, he is 5'9".
Is that all he is?
Yes.
He used to stand on a box while he's in the next debate.
There's a reason why the boots were there.
Their heels.
Yeah. Well, we saw Marco Rubio do the same thing.
Oh, he got called out for that as well.
He bought the high heeled boots, to wear during the campaign and all that. And obviously there's some credence to it because
they're both the same size. They're both the same size. Yeah. They're both the same height.
Yeah. It's now Marco looks
taller.
Average. No, I would say the opposite. I would say DeSantis looks taller on TV, on camera, that sort of thing. He kind of presents taller, maybe because he's kind of stockier, up top. But
yeah.
But I don't know. In corporate America, you can say the same thing. You hear about that taller men typically, get more leadership positions,
exactly,
and higher pay and that sort of thing. And there's obviously some psychology to it. But will it affect this election? Who knows? Right now, one of the things that I know is that some of the latest polling is showing is that pretty much all of the Republican candidates can be Biden. And that's just starting to kind of surface because of how poorly, his approval ratings are.
Well, I can't believe that 41% still think he's doing a good job. Those people live under a rock.
It's not even that concept anymore. It's the fact that they're never going to say something against. Again, there are parts in Florida that you can say whatever you want about a Republican, and they're never going to say the opposite direction. And the same thing you have with the Democrats. You have that base of like 30, 40% that are always going to vote for their person. It's the margins that are starting to build that we win these elections nowadays.
It's the independents.
Yeah, and
always.
It's the huge independence movement that the Democrats have been losing. The independents were Democrats at one time. Majority of them probably were. And the fact that they're not willing to register as Democrats, which means that they're not as loyal to the party. So this coming election cycle, I am fascinated to see what it's going to look like because, again, Trump is making inroads in the Asian population, the African American population. Hispanics have been insane for the governor, for the president, for 45. And seeing that, I don't see us having an issue now where the reason why Trump lost in 2020 was because of the white male not coming in as aggressive as they did in the past. Like, he lost in that demographic. I don't think we're going to see that again. I think the other demographics are going to push him over if he does become the nominee this coming cycle.
And isn't it funny that the more he gets indicted, the more popular he becomes? And I've seen people in Atlanta, African Americans in Atlanta, that were all standing out there, and I'm not going to say the word, and for Trump.
Yeah.
And I've seen more and more videos online on Twitter and X and other places.
The conversation.
Than I've ever seen. Yeah. And I don't know how big that is, but it's fascinating to me that people are. I don't know if is it because he might be a crook now, or is it because they feel like police officers or law enforcement and that they have gotten screwed by law enforcement and DAs and people like that. And now they think the same thing's happening to Donald Trump. So it makes him more relatable. Yeah. I don't know.
We've had this conversation. The moment that they started doing, like, he was in New York and they had the arraignment, and I was like, they have made me want to vote for him again. They've made me want to vote for him again because of how much they're desperately trying to pull his name off the ballot. You are trying to take away choice from the American people. And we've said this before, if they would have just said nothing, no trial, no not, just leave him alone, I bet you Trump wouldn't even be in the ether of running again.
I agree.
But because you keep on putting his name out there, he's going to get more and more attention.
The same thing that happened in 2016. Everybody, all they did was talk about Trump. They talked about Trump. And so, because even though he's been indicted, he is in the news constantly, and everybody talks about him.
Correct.
That's free advertising.
Well, and the fact that, again, as we just talked about, the Russian interference was a hoax, and the Steele dossier was a hoax, and
the Ukrainian phone call was an overreach on the Democrat side. Like every time they file something, it becomes that it's not enough, or it doesn't do what they say it's going to happen.
So what is what other assumption is the American people going to make other than either A, you think he's guilty of all of it, and you're just ignoring reality at that point, or B, most people are realizing, guess what? The government is not here to protect any of us, and in fact, if anything, they're out to get him, and they're out to take him down, and they see all of this for what it is.
They would rather destroy the institutions than allow Trump another 4 years. Which, if you would have just been okay with it but wasn't trying to manipulate. They were talking about this. That woman wrote a book about how the election. She doesn't say the election was stolen, but she said there was a lot of hanky panky happening in the 2020, and it was like the manipulation of the media, the manipulation of tech moguls, the manipulation of the federal agencies, and you're like, they're doing all of this to try to get him out of office, which means that once it comes to light, people are going to get pissed and they're going to want to vote for him again.
Well, we saw. I mean, we've proven now, thanks to Elon Musk, we've proven, and Zuckerberg has owned up to the fact that the federal government was manipulating the elections, they were manipulating the news cycle, and they were silencing conservative voices.
Correct.
What more evidence do you need to know that the election was severely interfered with to prevent Trump from having a second administration?
And the only way to get those people to stop doing things like that is for Trump to get into office. And that's my position.
The problem is our government is so huge. I don't know. I mean, honestly, like how much of it, Vivek talks about it, and he's thrown out numbers as large as 75% of the government, would basically, would be dissolved, which again, I mean, sounds insane, but in all reality, knowing the level of corruption and where it's at, I mean, that's probably about where you need to be to truly bring in the reform that you need to get this government back on track.
So could anybody do what they're all saying they're going to do other than Trump? I mean, because like I said earlier, he has nothing to lose now.
The problem is whether or not, because the speculation is that Trump would not be able to hold the House and he wouldn't be able to win the Senate if he were to win the presidency. And honestly, without Congress, I don't think you can make that level of reform without having both houses, honestly.
I have to push back. The fact is, if we are able to win the White House, I think that does come with the House will probably win as well, just because the districts and that he would have to win to become president are going to be, or he's going to have to win the popular votes in those states.
Yeah. And I do think that the Senate is going to go Republican.
I don't know about that. I'm very apprehensive of the Senate going Republican. I'm more confident that we keep the House or grow the House than we do lose the Senate. Or get the Senate back.
I mean, you have to look at some of these cities. You have to look at New York City. And, AOC is having a lot of issues in her district because of all the immigrants that are coming into New York. San Francisco, Pelosi, she's probably going to get reelected, right?
Which is insane.
But there has to be a breaking point.
84 years old.
Well, and not only that, but San Francisco is literally falling apart. I mean, you have people doing all kinds of things in the street, from drugs to bathroom use, and homelessness is rampant. Businesses are
businesses are closing,
but they don't care. The residents do not care. They would rather keep on voting Democrats, so then they themselves think that they are progressive and they are God's gift to the world. I mean, if they at least voted for somebody else. Even if it was another Democrat, you'd be, okay, there's some level of sanity here because they at least got rid of Nancy, Pelosi, or they at least got rid of Gavin Newsom. They at least, did something about the problem, even if it's not electing a Republican. But they won't even go that far. I don't understand, and that's kind of why I want to see if they will make the video about when California went from red to blue to figure out why is there such a stagnation when it comes to the Democratic Party, when it comes to their people. There's no leadership coming up into the ranks. All of them are just absolutely ridiculous. And what we're finding in the Republican Party, that at least our ranks are trying to fill up more with younger and more vibrant individuals.
We're going to take a quick little water break. We're going to lose audio here for just a second. We need to kind of restart one of our equipment, and then we'll kind of jump right back into the conversation, because we do want to pull up the poll numbers, and we can't pull it up right now without this. So just a quick break as we restart something here. Don't go anywhere. Hang tight. More of the yard sign here in a minute. Difficulty, but we're back up and running, and again we've had a lot really kind of hinging on, how does this affect the election, right? I think that's what everybody thinks about, worries about, when we're talking about the news of the day, the political news of the day. And so we were taking a look at 538, and we're going to pull that up here in a second, and really what's been interesting is, what you guys were saying was true. It seems that a lot of the controversy that is, basically consumed Donald Trump's campaign, because really, he hasn't run much of a campaign. It's been mostly about
how can he?
Right, exactly. And the one thing that bothers me from the outside is that he does. There have been reports of him using campaign funds to pay for some of the legal fees of all this stuff that's happening. Where again, if you're allegedly as wealthy as you say you are, then why are you using campaign funds to pay your legal bills?
Because it's a smart thing to do.
Yeah. Why would I use my own money?
But in the latest, we've got Trump ahead at 55, almost 60%, 55.5%.
Amazing.
In the primary, and DeSantis, who again they're. And at this point, I don't think it's anything the campaign can do. I don't think that there's anything that the DeSantis campaign can do other than have Trump show up at a debate. I don't think that there's anything that the DeSantis campaign can do to kind of turn it around. He's still in second place, but he's at 14.2%. Being that he originally started off, I think, somewhere in the high 20s, maybe low 30s, and now that's obviously at about half. Ramaswamy, kind of like, the new star, I guess, in this political process, is half of that at 7.6%. Nikki Haley hanging in there strong at 6.1%. Pence, surprisingly, is at 4.7%. And then anything below that, because I think if you're anything below that, you're not even going to be allowed on the debate stage. But Christie comes in at 3%. Scott is 2.6%.
Hutchins, Tim Scott, nothing.
Yeah, he's a
nice guy.
And then the problem is that when you're going up against such a big personality like Trump, you can't just be like the kind of nice guy, like the nice, soft-spoken, level-headed guy.
But this is the thing: if there is a second debate, and if Trump does attend that second debate, I don't think they attack Trump. I honestly don't think so. I think they attack DeSantis and the other guy that I always get his name wrong. Ramaswamy. That I think they'll go after them, and you'll have attacks from the others going after those two and trying to pull, because it's more of a race or who's going to be vice president. Honestly, that's how it felt this entire time already. Yeah. So I can see DeSantis going after Trump. That makes sense. But then everyone's going to be attacking DeSantis.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say real quick here on our screen, we'll see. First of all, real quick is, again, 54.2% disapprove of Joe Biden. He's down into the barely 40%. He's got almost 41% approval rating. I think if that gets below 40, he's done. You could basically elect a penguin over Biden. Now, go ahead and scroll up if you don't mind. And to get down to, there it is right there on the right hand side. Again, Trump at 55%. DeSantis, click on that where it says see all primary polls, you'll see the breakdown there. And again, this is over on 538 where they kind of average out all of the political polling that's happening out there. And so, yeah, I mean, certain polls, especially like in the early primary states are going to be different because their election's coming up soon. But again, I don't know that there's anything really at this point that anybody could do to beat Trump.
So the numbers that I'm looking at right now, because I'm looking at the YouGov, where it's Biden 49, Trump 50. I'm shocked that Trump is above Biden at the moment. I think that's a clear indication that there is a problem with the Biden administration and with his campaign. And the first set of questions that they asked was about his age and fitness questions, and those were fascinating. So Biden against Trump, if elected in 2024, they would finish a second term. They believe Biden has a 34% chance of finishing a second term. Leaving office before second term ends is 44%.
Yeah. And
not sure that he'll even make it is 22%. Those are fascinating numbers.
Well, again, and Democrats have a right to be concerned, especially, when they have a vice president like Kamala Harris, in that seat. And they don't like her either. I mean, she's just as bad for the ticket as all these other issues are.
But they can't get rid of her because
they don't want to get rid of her. Historically,
I don't think you can.
Oh yeah, no. Historically, you can run with a different.
When was the last time that we had that situation?
I mean, it's been a long time. It's been decades. But
I mean, imagine she is she's not really a black woman, but they have said they elected a black woman to be vice president. Imagine if Biden got
politically, they can't get rid of her. Legally, yes, they can.
Well, yeah.
I mean, they can replace her on the ticket.
But I do think politically, if they got rid of her, it would be a disaster.
Oh, yeah.
Even though she's a disaster, in my opinion.
Well, because, again, you still got, people like the women of The View and, that think, that she's, God's gift to women in politics, and again, she's just... I mean, I can't even call it a disappointment. It's not even disappointing.
She's
it's
incompetent.
Incompetent. I mean, to the worst degree. I mean, at least with Biden, when his brain slips, I mean, you can attribute it to his age. I mean, what's Kamala's excuse?
And she hasn't gotten better.
No, because
it's been 3 years, and she's still...
It gets even worse.
It's her ego.
Salad.
I think it's her ego. Honestly, I think the cause of her being the way she is her ego. And she thinks she's a good public speaker. She thinks she's a good politician.
She watched herself? I mean, come on. Not. She's awful.
And the thing comes is that you're going to be criticized from the other side regardless, right? So she must think, oh, they're just saying that because they don't like me. When in reality, again, there are plenty of Democrats who've realized her incompetence and have realized that the worst thing for them, other than Biden, not being able to finish out a term, is having Kamala Harris finish out a term.
That would be the worst situation to occur.
Look, and people, Gavin Newsom's getting interviewed and hit with that question regularly. Is he going to run?
You know what? Though? We should. If I would say, let it happen this year and next year. So then we get the first African American female and first Indian American female and first female president.
Just get it out of the way.
Get it out of the way.
You don't have to deal with it anymore. And it's not like that's not an issue, because I would love to see a woman president one of these days. And yes,
a Republican.
Give me a good candidate for a female president, and I'm okay with it. Yeah. Hillary Clinton killed half of her staff, mysteriously. So let's not even go there when it comes to her hit list and going from there. And the rest of them are just even more. Feinstein, like, she doesn't even know what century she's in, and the other ones are even worse. And that's what I'm saying. There's no good female Democrat candidate that is out there that I could imagine voting for.
Right.
However, with the Republicans, I can think of 7 females right now that I would be much more willing to vote for as a female president going forward from there. So I don't. Yes, I agree on both of your points. That I would love to see how the Democrats are going to feng shui their way out of not having Kamala Harris as the next person on the ticket.
Yeah.
Because Gavin Newsom has already said that, oh no, it's her turn. It's her turn if she's to run. And I'm like, that's insane. That's an absolute insane.
I mean, think of how she was when she ran for president. I mean, she lasted what, a couple months?
She didn't even
dropped out before Iowa.
Dropped out before California, her own state. It was insane.
That's not good.
That the numbers showed that no one wanted to vote for her in her own state, which was absolutely insane.
At least in the Republican primary, they waited until they got to their own state to, decide whether or not they were viable.
But that's also another thing that tells you about California is that they only vote for whoever has the D on their name. There's no nuance comes to voting. Whereas in Florida, it's more of not in the large metros,
because Northern California is conservative.
Yeah, and the Central Valley of that part. Yeah. It's insane, though. It's absolutely insane how the voting cycle is now.
Well, and so they're talking, about Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer. It's not that they don't have a bench. The problem is that it's not, their bench is not palatable to their base, right? Because as we've seen, the progressives are continuing to push harder and faster to the left. And so they're going to want to, like we've seen with this administration, they're going to want to see somebody that's trans, or they're going to want to see somebody that's LGBT. Obviously, we already had Buttigieg, as a candidate, and obviously a failed Department of Transportation head. And so the only thing I could see really working, really able to take down Gavin Newsom is his own identity, really, his own genetic makeup. The fact that he's a white male. And that's not going to play well in the Democratic Party anymore, not in today's Democratic Party.
I keep hearing that, and of course, I don't know if it's true or not, but a lot of people say that what's going to happen is Joe Biden is not going to want to get out, but Michelle Obama is going to get in.
No, that's not going to happen either.
I don't think so.
Sure?
Yeah. I mean, you heard so many reports about her hating to live at the White House and how she kind of really just doesn't really have the same taste for politics as Barack does.
Also, the Obamas have no traction whatsoever with the American people now. They are doing horrible when it comes to fundraising. They have lost their Netflix specials. They lost their podcasts and everything.
The black community, admittedly, will tell you, I've had many friends of mine tell me that they did nothing for the black community, and which that's correct. They did zero for the black community.
And actually, even though you don't hear about this very much, Donald Trump did a lot for the black community.
Right.
He gave money to the colleges. He the unemployment level was not only was it low overall, but it was also low in the African American community.
When a lot of them understood too that a lot of these opportunity zones, were designated across the state, that very much targeted, minority communities, black and Hispanic communities where, again, businesses and investors were not willing to go in, now had a financial advantage to go into those communities and invest. And because, again, it was advantageous for them to do so.
And at the time,
that's had a huge impact on those communities.
And at the time when we were talking about the historical black colleges and their funding, the Breakfast Club made a fascinating concept, a fascinating connection, where it was that they felt the funding was almost like a flag of, okay, we're gonna pay for this year, but we're not gonna do it. You got to come back to us next year for us to get more funding. And Trump said it to where they never have to go back to Congress for more funding. That was it was more or less like a check mark every single cycle for Democrats, and it became a situation to where they were only doing it for
He took it off the table.
Yeah. And that's what I think a lot of people were really proud about that when it came to the president.
Right, but again, does he really get the credit that he deserves for things like that? No, of course not. But we'll continue to see. I mean, I know you guys kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the jet. Maybe we'll get into that next week and see if they've recovered it by then yet.
I'm going to go look for it, because isn't there a giant reward if I can find a stealth jet that's missing?
$70 million
jet. The Russians will pay you $50 million.
Exactly.
In oil, they don't have dollars anymore.
I'm sure the Chinese would give you a little more.
Bitcoins.
Oh, I'm already seeing, there's somebody already kind of writing the movie on this, I mean,
how do you lose an $80 million jet?
Well, and especially if it's on autopilot, well, who's to say there wasn't some nefarious kind of deal made there where that jet's automatically flying itself to,
China.
Technically, it would get to Russia before I don't even know what direction it's going, but someone has to find it.
I don't know. So we'll see. Thank you so much, Darla Jaye.
Thank you
for coming on the show. It was a lot of fun. Anibal, thank you as always.
Oh, yeah, pleasure.
We'll have more political news for you next Monday. Thank you so much for watching, listening, whenever, wherever you may be doing so. Again, you can catch the show on Facebook, YouTube, all of your favorite podcast platforms if you want the audio version of the show. But we, of course, invite you to also join us on our website, theyardsignshow.com. That's theyardsignshow.com. Thank you so much for listening and watching. We'll catch you next week. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.